The latest developments in economic relations between China and Russia have highlighted the two countries' turbulent international landscape. Although bilateral trade is expected to increase only slightly by 1.9% in 2024 to $2.8 billion, Russia is facing serious economic difficulties. While Russia's crude oil exports to China hit record highs, trade with developed economies has fallen sharply, accounting for only about 10% of total exports by the end of 2024. In addition, the geopolitical landscape has become increasingly complicated as former US President Donald Trump, through his special envoy to Ukraine, proposed a 100-day plan to end the conflict. At the same time, Russia is facing huge military losses, and Ukraine continues to build a $30 billion defense industry, posing new challenges for the region and the world. Trade relations between China and Russia have significantly changed in 2023-2024. In 2023, bilateral trade reached $240.10 billion, up 26.3% year-on-year, with China's exports to Russia soaring 46.9%, driven mainly by automotive and industrial goods. However, this picture has changed, as recent data shows the first decline in China's exports to Russia in July 2024, with a 16% decline in March and a 13.5% decline in April. Between January and July 2024, Russia's imports from China fell by more than 1% to $62 billion. However, the auto sector remains a bright spot, with China's auto exports to Russia set to increase by 594% in 2023. In addition, China has tightened export controls on dual-use items since December 2023. The new regulations require a licensing system and a restricted goods list, and exporters must disclose the end user and intended use. Although China's exports of electronic integrated circuits to Russia increased by 140% from 2021 to 2023, the regulations are aimed at restricting the export of sensitive technology, especially in the electronics and industrial sectors. In addition, the financial relationship between the two countries also faces many challenges. Several major Chinese banks, such as Ping An Bank, Bank of Ningbo, and China Guangfa Bank, have stopped accepting payments from Russia, resulting in cross-border transaction processing times of up to 18 days. The renminbi remains important, accounting for 53% of transactions on the Moscow Stock Exchange in March 2024. However, payment processing issues and depleted renminbi reserves in Russia have led to a significant decline in trade volumes in the second quarter of 2024. To adapt to the changes, both Russia and China have turned to alternative channels of trade through smaller regional banks. However, these transactions are subject to increased scrutiny from Western regulators, especially given the risk of secondary sanctions. Despite efforts to adjust, bilateral trade relations have faced increasing obstacles due to the complex international economic and political context. Economic pressure is the main driver behind this change. Western sanctions against Russia have profoundly changed the economic landscape between Moscow and Beijing. As trade relations with the West have declined sharply, Russian exports to Western countries are expected to account for only 10% of total exports by the end of 2024. This has forced Russia to increasingly rely on China, reshaping the trade pattern between the two countries in a volatile geopolitical and economic context. The European Union's decision in June 2023 to impose sanctions on Chinese companies marked a turning point in the trilateral relationship. Chinese digital technology giants have cancelled numerous projects in Russia, largely due to concerns about secondary sanctions from the US. The impact of the sanctions extends beyond direct trade restrictions, with Chinese companies becoming increasingly cautious about protecting their access to Western markets. Amid internal challenges, China has shifted its economic focus to maintaining stability at home. The International Monetary Fund forecasts that China's economic growth will slow to 4.6% in 2024. Beijing's strategic policy focuses on promoting technological innovation, expanding domestic demand, reforming public finances, and ensuring financial stability. These priorities have had a direct impact on China's approach to Russia. Foreign direct investment in China fell to a 30-year low in 2023, as foreign companies withdrew profits rather than reinvested them. At the same time, Chinese companies have become more cautious about investing in Russia, which they see as a high-risk, low return market. The change in risk assessment has stalled major cooperation projects between the two countries. No new large-scale cooperation projects between China and Russia have been implemented since 2022. Even initial talks on the acquisition of Western home appliance factories in Russia by Chinese investors have not yielded concrete results. The structure of bilateral trade remains a concern for Russia. Russian exports continue to be dominated by raw materials and semi-finished goods, while China supplies high value-added industrial products, especially machinery and high-tech equipment. This imbalance has become more pronounced as Chinese manufacturers have expanded into the Russian industrial market, especially in the automotive sector. Financial problems have added pressure to economic relations between Moscow and Beijing. Chinese banks have tightened controls on transactions with Russia, causing cross-border payment processing times to increase to 18 days. This has created major obstacles to bilateral trade, leading to forecasts that Russian imports will fall significantly in the second quarter of 2024, further highlighting the challenges in economic relations between the two countries. Against this backdrop, other international issues, such as the conflict in Ukraine, continue to attract the attention of major powers. Former President Donald Trump, through his special envoy, Keith Kellogg, announced an ambitious peace initiative for Ukraine. The proposal marked a major departure from Trump's initial commitments when he moved from promising to resolve the conflict in 24 hours to focusing on a 100-day roadmap to achieve peace practically and systematically. The 100-day plan is divided into three main phases: identifying the negotiating parties, developing an outreach strategy, and setting the terms of the agreement. Kellogg delayed his visit to Kiev and European cities until after his inauguration, signaling a cautious and measured approach. The plan emphasizes direct negotiations with the parties involved, using a carrot-and-stick approach to bring both sides to the negotiating table. Military aid to Ukraine would be maintained, but would be contingent on the country's participation in peace talks. If Russia refuses to cooperate, the US is expected to increase military assistance to Ukraine as a deterrent. Key negotiating points include establishing a demilitarized zone along the current front lines under the supervision of international organizations, postponing discussions on Ukraine's NATO membership, implementing security guarantees, and making sanctions relief conditional on Russian compliance. However, this plan faces many challenges, including ensuring Ukraine's security if the territory is ceded, as well as issues of reparations, war crimes accountability, and conditions for lifting sanctions. Meanwhile, European leaders have stressed that maintaining US military aid is necessary to pressure Russia into serious negotiations. On the other hand, Russia is facing great pressure on its military resources due to serious equipment losses and limitations in its production capacity. The Russian armed forces are currently losing about 100 tanks and 220 artillery pieces per month, while tank production is at just 17 per month, far below the losses. At the same time, ammunition production, fighter aircraft maintenance, and electronic warfare systems are also severely constrained by component shortages. Western sanctions have made it difficult for Russia to access critical components from abroad, causing serious disruptions in the supply chain. Russia's military logistics system is also facing major challenges, with each soldier requiring 440 pounds of supplies per day, far exceeding the current logistics network's capacity. Replacing specialized equipment, such as gun barrels and tanks, is difficult, as Russia has only 2 operational forges, severely limiting its ability to repair equipment. To address this, Russia has increased cooperation with alternative suppliers. China provides dual-use components and commercial technology, while Iran has pledged to build a factory in Tatarstan to produce 6,000 Shahed drones by 2025. North Korea has also become an important partner, supplying some 6 million artillery shells and 5 Hwasong-11 missiles, while Russia has shared drone technology, including a license to produce the Lancet UAV. However, these deals are not without their drawbacks. The quality of imported equipment often falls short of Western standards and requires complex negotiations, notably a personal visit by Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu to North Korea. While having a positive impact, these alternative sources of supply are only temporary and are not enough to completely solve the difficulties Russia is facing. The strategic partnership between China and Russia is dramatically reshaping the global power landscape, and analysts see it as the greatest threat to core US national interests in 6 decades. The alliance, largely driven by a shared opposition to Western dominance, marks a decisive shift in international relations. The current diplomatic landscape reflects growing cooperation between Beijing and Moscow. The two countries have jointly vetoed 16 UN resolutions since 2007, demonstrating a firm opposition to US foreign policy goals. This cooperation extends beyond traditional diplomacy to joint military activities, such as exercises in the South China Sea and long-range bomber patrols near Alaska. The core of this partnership is focused on challenging US global influence through strategic goals such as replacing US dominance on the international stage, weakening US power in Europe, the Indo-Pacific, and the Middle East, breaking up US-led alliances, undermining international confidence in Washington's reliability, and changing the regional military balance. Trade relations between the three powers also reflect complex and interdependent relationships. China's exports to Russia increased by 57% in September 2023, marking the fastest growth in 9 months. However, the relationship remains asymmetric, with China's economy more than 20 times larger than Russia's. China-Russia trade is only equivalent to China's trade with Malaysia, an economy that is only 1/5 the size of Russia's. The United States still retains a significant advantage thanks to its influence over European allies, a key area of Russian foreign policy. Western sanctions have also prompted caution from Chinese banks, with major state-owned enterprises avoiding acquisitions of Russian assets from Western companies. However, the partnership is not entirely aligned in terms of strategic interests. As the world's second-largest economy, China has a greater stake in maintaining regional and global stability than Russia. Moscow, meanwhile, has been reluctant to become a junior partner to Beijing, expanding its strategic options by deepening cooperation with Iran, North Korea, and India. China has shown calculated restraint in its approach. Beijing has banned the export of Lungsan chips to Russia and imposed strict controls on dual-use technology. While China or Russia alone may not be able to become a significant counterweight, their cooperation attracts middle powers such as Turkey, South Africa, and Brazil, which want a greater say in the international order. However, this partnership faces many inherent limitations stemming from historical suspicions and overlapping interests in regions such as Asia, Africa, and the Arctic. These tensions could lead to a rift between the two countries in the medium to long term, as has happened in previous periods of cooperation between Beijing and Moscow. Ukraine's military posture is undergoing a significant transformation amid changing international alliances and support mechanisms. The United States has committed more than $66.5 billion in security assistance since the Biden administration began, providing a critical foundation for Ukraine's defense capabilities. Ukraine's armed forces have demonstrated exceptional effectiveness through international training programs. From February 2022 to February 2024, more than 116,000 Ukrainian troops were trained in 30 countries, with a focus on collective operations and leadership development. These efforts are coordinated by the Security Assistance Group Ukraine (SAGU), based in Wiesbaden, Germany, through 8 specialized alliances, including ground-air defense, air capabilities, armored vehicle operations, artillery systems, mine clearance, drone warfare, information technology, and maritime security. Ukraine's negotiating position is now based on thorough military preparedness and strong international support. The European Union has allocated more than $1 billion in humanitarian aid, strengthening Ukraine's position at the negotiating table. In parallel, the G7 countries have deployed innovative financing mechanisms, leveraging profits from frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine's military needs. The US Department of Defense continues to provide $25 billion in aid packages, including air defense systems, artillery ammunition, and anti-tank weapons, helping Ukraine maintain its advantage in potential peace negotiations. International support for Ukraine is demonstrated through multifaceted aid programs. The European Union affirms its unwavering commitment through political solidarity against Russian aggression, financial support for recovery efforts, coordination of humanitarian aid, and sanctions against Russia. The UK, a top donor alongside the US and Germany, has pledged $8 billion in total support, of which 7.8 billion is dedicated to military aid. NATO has also expanded its role in coordinating military aid and training between members from July 2024. The Ukraine Defense Contact Group, which includes defense ministers from global partners, meets regularly to assess battlefield requirements and strategic priorities. The collaboration between U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd J. Austin III and Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov underscores the commitment to strengthening Ukraine's defense industrial base. As a result, the international alliance provides Ukraine with the capabilities it needs to defend its territory and maintain operational effectiveness in the fight against Russian aggression. Global financial markets are experiencing profound volatility as geopolitical tensions reshape energy flows and trade relationships. The conflict in Ukraine, coupled with sanctions against Russia, has created the first truly global energy crisis, fundamentally changing the way international markets operate. Russia, while remaining the world's third largest oil producer after the United States and Saudi Arabia, has seen its oil export revenues decline, while export volumes are expected to stabilize at 7.5 million barrels per day in 2023. Oil revenues are expected to fall by $4.2 billion year-on-year, reflecting the impact of falling prices and tightening sanctions. In addition to oil, Russia's gas industry also faces serious challenges. Europe's reduced dependence on Russian gas to just 10% of its total needs has forced Russia to seek new markets, changing global energy flows. European countries have increased imports of LNG from the United States and invested heavily in renewable energy, creating direct competition with Russian supplies. This shift has not only put pressure on Russia, but also caused global commodity markets to become highly volatile, especially when traditional supply chains are disrupted. In this context, global trade flows have also been restructured to adapt to new conditions. China has emerged as an important trading partner for Russia, with exports from China to Russia increasing sharply, reaching $111 billion in 2023. The automotive industry is a prime example, with vehicle exports from China to Russia increasing by 594%, reflecting the change in trade relations due to Western sanctions. However, this trade relationship remains asymmetrical, with China's economy being more than 20 times larger than Russia's, making Russia increasingly dependent on China in key economic sectors. The sanctions have also changed the global financial architecture, with the emergence of alternative payment mechanisms. The yuan has become the dominant currency in trade transactions between Russia and China, accounting for 53% of the total trading volume on the Moscow Exchange in March 2024. Russia's SPFS and China's CPES have partly replaced SWIFT, creating a new financial model in the context of Western efforts to isolate Russia. This shift not only affects Russia, but also reflects the shift in global economic power, as countries seek to reduce their dependence on traditional Western-controlled payment systems. These profound changes are not limited to energy or finance, but pose broader challenges to global economies. As trade and financial flows face a radical restructuring, stakeholders will need to adapt to reshape their place in the new world economic order. The future of global trade and energy will therefore depend on how countries respond to these pressures and reorient their strategic relationships. As the conflict in Ukraine continues to escalate, a growing number of peace scenarios are emerging, with various actors proposing different frameworks for resolving the issue. The UN Security Council recently discussed a peaceful solution, with a strong focus on territorial integrity and security. International pressure for a negotiated settlement is growing, as countries and international organizations increasingly recognize the importance of a ceasefire and the establishment of sustainable security mechanisms. Current peace proposals reflect different approaches from key international actors. The China-Brazil joint initiative calls for a range of measures, including an immediate cessation of hostilities, opposition to the deployment of nuclear weapons, increased humanitarian assistance, international cooperation in the energy and trade sectors, and the resumption of direct dialogue. However, Ukraine maintains that President Zelensky's 10-point peace formula is the only way to achieve comprehensive, just and lasting peace. Ukraine's proposal calls for Russia to completely withdraw its troops and restore Ukraine's territorial integrity. While Russia's demands include Ukraine withdrawing from territories it partially occupies and abandoning its aspirations to join NATO. In this context, the shift in the regional balance of power is also becoming evident, as NATO strengthens its conventional defense capabilities, the military alliance is facing a difficult situation, as it must decide between building a solid forward defense capability and preventing the escalation of the conflict. Three key questions now are the possibility of transitioning from passive to active defense, the need to reassess the balance between conventional defense capabilities and nuclear weapons, and whether the nuclear strategy needs to be revised. Furthermore, the expiration of the New START Treaty in 2026 could create strategic uncertainty, without an agreed framework for controlling nuclear arsenals between the United States and Russia. China's expansion of its strategic nuclear arsenal could force the United States to modernize its armed forces, which would trigger a response from Russia. Ukraine's economic recovery is an unprecedented challenge. The World Bank estimates that reconstruction needs in the social, productive, and infrastructure sectors amount to $349 billion. 5 times the size of Ukraine's pre-war economy. The country needs long-term international support to carry out reconstruction. Ukraine's economic outlook remains complicated, with output forecast to decline further next year. Growth forecasts for 2023 are a minimal 0.3%, and experts estimate that it will take up to 13 years for the Ukrainian economy to recover to 3% growth. The private sector is crucial in reconstruction, although it is largely contingent on security guarantees. The Ukrainian government faces significant challenges, including addressing a labor shortage amid an unemployment rate of 26%, managing reconstruction costs estimated at between $411 billion and $1 trillion, and implementing the institutional reforms required to join the European Union. The European Union has demonstrated its strong commitment to Ukraine through significant support mechanisms, including the allocation of EUR 8 billion in loans and EUR 25 billion in grants under the EU's Ukraine-based budget. These reconstruction efforts require the efficient use of funds to offset losses and restructure the Ukrainian economy. Despite facing severe challenges during the war, the Ukrainian banking system has remained stable thanks to strict controls and high interest rates by the National Bank of Ukraine. These measures have helped prevent capital flight and stabilize the exchange rate after the planned devaluation of the hryvnia in July 2022. These efforts have helped the Ukrainian economy maintain some stability during a difficult time, creating a foundation for further reconstruction in the future. These developments suggest a potential turning point in the conflict. The combination of China's strategic shift, Russia's military constraints, and strong international support for Ukraine shapes the path forward. Those who believe in Ukraine's cause and wish to show their support can comment number 1 below this article. The outcome of this conflict undoubtedly carries lasting implications for global security and economic stability.